So what was the point of making Dex an alien? Hi everyone and welcome to another Ranger Red. Of course, everyone knows I'm Archer 9234. Today I'll be discussing the final two parts of A Friend in Need, parts 2 and 3. Now, of course, this is no adaptation from any past Super Sentai episode. It's simply just reusing all original American made, except for reusing stock footage from the various Dire Ranger episodes, and of course, again, reusing footage from the first few episodes of Kamen Rider Black RX. Now, the episode begins basically where the first episode left off. Basically, we see Dex and the other Rangers finally go underground to protect themselves from Count Dragon's attack forces in the atmosphere. But I also like to point out the really poor special effects in this episode. Mainly the reason why this was going on is not because it's basically 1995, but it was basically because they're using footage from the 80s Kamen Rider Black RX special effects, and they're basically trying to overlay the spaceship on sky backgrounds and planet backgrounds, while this footage was basically always used in space in the Kamen Rider footage. So when the Rangers and Dex are finally inside the cave, we basically get a breaking area for the episode, so we can actually finally take a breather from all the fighting and stuff. And we finally get introduced to Dex himself. He finally takes off his mask, and of course his other four people, we finally get introduced to them. Since Dex finally showed the Rangers his face, he actually asked the Rangers, since I trust you with my secret identity, you should show us your faces for your secret identity. So obviously the Rangers accept that and finally show their faces. The thing that really is kind of weird though is that Dex powers down in this part, so we see Dex's full original appearance, including his face. But in this moment, the Rangers only take off their helmets. At no point do they actually power down, which is kind of weird because it makes the suits even look more cheesier because they simply just pull the helmets off. It just kind of breaks that, believability between the suits being, special instead of just, popping off a helmet. Now, after Dex finally sees who the Rangers are, we finally get a full backstory between who is Dex and what happened to his people. His people are basically simple people. They created, obviously we know from the previous episode, they created Alpha, and we saw a little bit of who they are, what was going on, and how Count Dragon attacked them. And we also get some backstory to the Black RX suit. Basically, the suit's powers are passed down between generations of Dex's family, and of course, Count Dragon was attacking the planet. The powers went to him, and we finally got to see how he got the powers. Now, the thing that's weird, though, is that we see how Dex gains his powers, but we're seeing footage from actually the first pilot episode of Kamen Rider Black RX. His original suit in Black series, because Black RX is basically a continuation of the Black series, his suit was basically disabled. He couldn't do anything anymore with the old suit, and then the powers came back to him, and that's the reason why we see the footage where we see Black RX on the floor and being charged up. That's the reason why it doesn't really make sense. Why would Dex be inside a deserted area getting powers like that? So after about 30 minutes of being on planet Edenoi, we finally head back to Earth and we see what Kimberly is up to. Kimberly has recontacted the command center, and Alpha is probably keeping apprised of Kimberly, basically saying that the Rangers are on Edenoi. After we come from Kimberly, we finally get to see Bulk and Skull because they were missing pretty much from the first part, and we finally see what they've been up to. We've had the juice bar when we see that Bulk is overhearing a couple of girls and he's trying to impress them, and then of course, as usual, being his stupid self, knocks over a cup, and then of course goes in the background where Skull arrives. And of course Bulk is thinking up a scheme of what to do, and is overhearing the girls who are basically obsessed with the Power Rangers. They're trying to find out who they are. Skull, at least, is the smarter one. He's basically saying, no, I don't want to deal with this Power Ranger stuff again, basically referencing what they were doing in the last season. All of season 2, basically Bulk and Skull were trying to figure out who the Power Rangers were, and it was constantly backfiring, so of course Skull didn't want to do it. But this time Bulk basically says, we're not looking for the Power Rangers, we are going to be the Power Rangers. So of course they're trying to devise a plan to set up the girls in order to, go out with them. And of course they're just saying lies and stuff while behind the girls and saying them meet them here and blah, blah, blah. And it's just weird that the girls simply believe really two idiots in the juice bar to say they know them. So we head basically back to Edenoi, and we are continuing the backstory with Dex and stuff. But unfortunately, it gets interrupted to Count Dragon's forces. Now here we go with the splitting between American footage and Japanese footage. Dex has to fight off, 3 separate frog monsters. This is the footage from Kamen Rider Black RX. And of course, the Power Rangers, since they were never actually in the Kamen Rider franchise, have to fight off American-made monsters in their footage. So the team split up, and they're fighting the various forces. While the Rangers are basically fighting off two different forces from Count Dragon, of course, Lord Zed and Rita are finally finishing off their plans that they set up in the previous episode of their new monster. And we finally get introduced to the Repellor monster. Now, basically, this monster is American-made. The monster is not actually in any episode of Die Rangers or Kaku Rangers, since Season 3 is the beginning portion of introducing the Kaku Ranger footage. Since the Rangers and Dex are fighting the monsters and other minions on Edenoi, Alpha is having extreme amount of problems contacting the Rangers. They're unable to actually bypass the interference. I assume that's from Count Dragon. Alpha has no option to signal Kimberly, which is obviously convenient because she's the one who's been sick and is the only one left on Earth. So unfortunately, she has no other choice. So Kim basically morphs and teleports to the same area that's been used hundreds and hundreds of times in scenes, same park area with the same hood and bench area. Unfortunately, since she's very sick, she really can't concentrate, and of course, she's sneezing all over the place. Now, here's the thing you have to kind of complain about. Normally, we always suspend your belief to Power Rangers because, of course, it's a lighthearted show. You have to forgive certain things that don't make logical sense. But in this case, it sticks out the most. During the fight, the Repellor gets sick from Kim's flu virus. But what doesn't make any sense is that Kim is sneezing inside her helmet. So how does the Repellor monster get sick from this sneeze at all? So basically, since Kim is sick, she can't really fight, basically. She doesn't have much energy in the fight. And of course, the Repellor monster at this point is basically outmatched. And we basically end the episode right here. Now, I also like to point out, just like in part 1, the end credits are reusing the stupid Green Ranger martial arts video. Episode 3 basically resumes from where we left off. Kimberly is struggling to fight the Repellor monster and is trying to figure out what to do. Luckily enough, the Repellor monster finally got the flu virus that Kim had, and of course is trying to deny it all the time, but eventually she figures out, yeah, you do got it. And of course, the Repellor monster retreats and heads back to Lord Zed's lair, and of course Kim has to go back to the command center trying to figure out what's going on. When the monster returns to Lord Zed's lair, of course Rita and Lord Zed are angry at him. They're completely complaining all the time, and he's trying to give an excuse. Well, I got sick from the Pink Ranger, and I can't really do anything. And of course, Rita brings in, of course, Finster, who creates all the monsters. The funny thing, though, is that this is one of the few times where we actually, Robel Axelrod, who voices Lord Zed, he also voices Finster, so basically the actor is talking to himself. So of course, since Finster tries to basically figure out what's going on with the monster, he's giving him little tests. And of course, Finster's trying to act like a doctor over here. You have to be out of the fight for 7 to 10 days, and of course he can't because Lord Zed's probably going to just kill him if he does that. And of course, Finster grabs these special tablets. Now, the thing that doesn't really make any sense is that the thing says tummy tablets. They're basically tablets, antacid tablets. So why is Finster giving him antacid tablets for the flu? It kind of doesn't make any sense. But of course, the tablets fix his cold for a little bit. And of course, Kimberly has no other choice but to return to action while Alpha's trying to figure out how to contact the Rangers back on Edenoi. Although I like to point out this, out of all the episodes and monsters that the Rangers fight, the monster getting sick was actually the best way to actually defeat the monsters. Basically, they retreat all the time, and they have to do all these weird things in order to get them a little bit well. So I think it would have been more successful if the Rangers constantly made the monsters get sick all the time. So while this is going on, Bulk and Skull are putting in their plan of action with the two girls. The two girls obviously arrive at the area that Bulk and Skull screamed out in the juice bar, which was kind of weird that no one else heard or believed them to show up. And of course, Bulk and Skull are basically dressed up in their really poor PR costumes that are even more worse than what they were doing in their dream sequence. Although I would like to point out that these costumes they made are very reminiscent to the Go Ranger costumes in Super Sentai. I don't know if this was on purpose. Bulk's helmet pretty much looks like Owl Ranger's helmet from Go Rangers. So eventually the girls are looking around in the area and are trying to say, well, where are the Power Rangers? These guys said it. And then of course Bulk and Skull, like their idiotic selves, come out and surprise the girls and try to convince the girls that they're Power Rangers. Obviously not. Who would believe this fat guy in this horrible costume would ever be Power Rangers? But Skull at least is trying to give a believable story, and of course the girls are not buying it. But unfortunately, Repellor overhears the conversation and teleports in and starts attacking and trying to get Bulk and Skull while they're running around, and the girls of course went into the car and locked the doors. The thing that's weird though is that why did the girls stick around? I mean, the girls are in the car, they lock the doors, go away in the car while the monster tries to kill Bulk and Skull. I mean, yeah, it's kind of evil and mean to the guys, but still, I'd rather save myself rather than deal with crazy guys that try to fake as Power Rangers. So while Bulk and Skull are dealing with the repellor monster, we head back to Edenoi and we finally see the Rangers finally fight off all Count Dragon's minions and they retreat off. Now, of course, the Masked Rider is fighting off those 3 toad monsters, and we actually get to hear the word Rider Kick. It's very rare that America usually keeps terminology, but in this case, they kept the Rider Kick terminology and how certain things function with the suit. Dex does a Rider Kick on one of the monsters and finally summons his finishing weapon from the belt. It comes out and he does his main finisher. The thing that, though, is very weird with this episode is that the footage, for some reason, in this episode was really blurred and out of focus. I'm not sure if this was actually happened in the actual episode that the footage was taken from, but I think it was more likely due to a cause of censoring, because they had very little bit of footage they could do with Kamen Rider Black RX, and they couldn't really reshoot stuff, so they had to use this. They were stuck with this footage, but I assume they blurred it out in order to deal with how Black RX finishes off the Toad monsters. It must have been a little bit too graphic, so they blurred it out to try to keep it out of focus so they could still use the footage. So once Dex finishes off the monster, we finally get final farewell between the Rangers. They finally agree that the Rangers must return to Earth because, you know, the repellor monster and Kim is having a lot of problems with this, so the Rangers have to take off and go away. While the Rangers are teleporting, Count Dragon finally tracks the Rangers and find out what planet they go to, and we get a little bit more information toward the other monsters that serve under Count Dragon. We finally get to hear the woman's voice, and of course we see the other monsters in his group. The footage again is reusing footage from the first episode of Kamen Rider Black RX, except we're seeing the introduction footage that was not used in the first episode, but being propagated here in this part. I also like to point out there was a continuity mistake using this footage. We basically see the blue guy reappear out of nowhere when we saw really Double Face and the other guys and the woman there, but not him. And we basically find out that Count Dragon has located and tracked the Power Rangers that were heading to Earth, and of course he was going to go conquer that planet next. While the Rangers are heading home, repellor is still harassing Bulk and Skull, and of course Lord Zed actually likes this. He likes toying with people, and he basically simply lets the monster grow, which really doesn't make any sense because they're just simply, you know, civilian people. They really don't do anything. But of course, since he wants to just take over the planet, he doesn't really care. So while the monster grows, of course, this is all American footage, and we're reusing the miniature trees and stuff all over the place. Kim is alerted to that the monster grows, and she heads out. I also like to point out that Kim's suit is reusing the Blade Blaster Bandai America toy and not actually using the Jew Ranger prop. When Kim and the other Rangers finally arrive on the place, they see that the repellor monster is huge and they have to, they have the summoning of the Zords as usual. But in this case, we finally get new footage of them summoning the Zords. Normally, whenever they were summoning, the Thunder Zords from the Dino Zords and doing their cross transformation, they would always constantly reuse the Jew Ranger footage that was basically their roll call. But in this case, they finally reshot it, although they reused the exact same voiceover work that they did back in season 2. This Megazord fight is all American made, since this monster is not featured in Dai or Kaku Rangers at all. This is all American made, meaning basically they're finally using the Thunder Megazord suit and the Tiger Zord suit from Japan. But of course they do intercut between stock footage of basically, certain things. The repellor monster is basically fighting the Tiger Zord, and of course the constant reuse of the same footage of Tommy laughing. I don't understand why they had to use this footage all the time. I know that the One Tiger cockpit footage was limited in Die Ranger, but there was still a lot of footage they could have used, but they simply just constantly reused this laughing shot that always has that continuity mistake with the one of the white spheres in the background. So after a little bit, of course, after the Tiger Zord and Thunder Zord combine their forces, they eventually defeat the repellor and finally end the Zord fight. It was pretty much simple fight. It wasn't that too hard of a fight because he was a simple basic monster, although it kind of underperforms to basically Rita was saying in the beginning that he was going to be basically the best monster they created, but unfortunately this was one of the shortest fights ever. We head back to the juice bar and we finally see that Bulk and Skull obviously survived the monster attack and return, and basically is saying that we don't do this ever again, and if I do this, staple my mouth shut. After all Bulk and Skull's nonsense, we finally cut back to Edenoi and we finally get the last moments of, and we finally get introduced to his father. And his father is basically explaining that since Count Dragon is now sending his forces to Earth, they have to send basically Dex to Earth. Now this is what bugs me about this whole three-part thing. Dex is an alien and everyone goes to Edenoi. But what was the point of creating this alien backstory for Dex if we're just simply going to go to Earth, Wouldn't it have been much more simpler to simply send the Rangers across another part of the planet to meet Dex as a regular human person? He basically is a human person. We don't really use the mind visual gem thing on him, so what was the point of him being an alien at all? So overall, I have to give the last two parts of Friend in Need a 2 out of 5. In the beginning, the episodes were better than the first part because we get more backstory to Dex's character, and we finally get to see more Masked Rider stuff. The Repellor monster was really lame. Not impressive that they were basically setting him up to him. He was sick, he had a cold. It was funny, yes, but it wasn't, a good monster type, and they defeated him right away. The US Zord footage wasn't really that good because instead of shooting, a complete Zord fight with American footage, they simply, are cutting between Japanese stock footage. And of course, since the episode ended on Dex, we didn't end on, a coda for the other 6 Rangers. We didn't see that if Kim got better, and we didn't get that much detail to what the Rangers feel toward Dex, except, they basically kind of just like him who he is, but we didn't really see, full thoughts of all the characters. Do you think this was an alright conclusion to the A Friend in Need parts, or do you think it was just too much of a focus on Dex, and he just basically stole the show, while the Rangers were basically shafted to the sidelines and just, doing their usual stuff while they were going on? Of course, leave your comments below on what you think on the episode, and of course, suggestions of future episodes you would like me to review. For next week's episode, I'm going to be reviewing Danger and Destiny. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys right back here next week.